set us up for what you tweeted and put out a short while ago about Jalen Brunson and the Knicks, if you could.
So the Knicks have been expected to make several salary-shedding moves dating back to the trade deadline in their efforts to potentially clear, upwards of $25 million to make an average annual salary offer of that number to Jalen Brunson on the open market once free agency begins on July 1st or June 30th at 6 p.m. Excuse me. But even still, everyone around the league is outside of New York is definitely still operating under the assumption that Jalen will be sticking around in Dallas long term.
Oh. So he would not go join his dad, who is an assistant coach under Tom Thibodeau. Any idea? What are people speculating as to what that price could ultimately be here?
It's going to be well over $20 million a year, or at least that's the benchmark. Of late, I've heard that there's confidence on Dallas' side that they will not be approaching the $100 million number. But, this is still very early. I am expecting Jalen's salary to be at least $20 million or more.
Jake, what's your personal view on Brunson? Because we don't think he's a number two, but you got to capitalize on a Luka window. And maybe the thought from many Mavs fans is you re-sign him even if you're overpaying so he can be a trade chip down the line. And it's not like you can take that $25 million and go sign someone else. How do you personally view Brunson?
He might not be a bona fide number two on a championship team, but he definitely was the Mavericks' second best player in the postseason and probably the second most important player, especially when Luka went down with injury. And there's a reason why the Pistons, for example, had interest in adding Jalen to be, a counterpart to Cade Cunningham in their backcourt. And, why the Knicks want to have him become their starting point guard. He is someone that a lot of NBA personnel view as someone who's only getting better and someone who really is an above-average starter in the backcourt. So will that price tag ultimately be too much? I mean, he's going to be right in line with Fred VanVleet's salary. That's how it sounds. And I think that's pretty commensurate with what his value will be in terms of what he also can bring on the court. So you factor in the good locker room, high-character guy, the fact that he's always been a winner dating back to high school and obviously at Villanova. I think it'd be a win-win for Dallas to bring him back in that ballpark salary range.
Jake Fischer, Bleacher Report, joining us here on 105.3 The Fan. We have discussed long time why no player wants to come to Dallas to play for whatever reason. The big-time players. What is the attraction level, though, for Luka? Does he change that at all? Are players, kind of lining up to play with him?
I do think that Luka is someone that players will want to come play with. The Mavericks don't have a ton of room to bring on people this summer. Obviously, they already made that big trade, or maybe big's not the right word, but they made the deal to bring in Christian Wood, and I don't see how much room they have to make much more drastic changes to this roster this offseason. But I think it was on the shop or something a couple weeks back. LeBron mentioned that Luka's someone he'd want to play with, and a lot of these connections start to get formed between these all-star players at All-Star Weekend. When he plays against guys in FIBA and in the Olympics, I'm sure he'll form some deeper connections with some stars in that regard. As he gets older and has more access to upper echelon players, I would expect that, especially with the state income tax in Texas and the fact that he is such a playmaker and a brilliant passer, I would think that there will be opportunity for, I say this all the time, but before the Bucks won the championship last year, Dallas was definitely a team that was on Giannis's list to potentially request a trade to if the Bucks, didn't work out. And, we saw it this year, right, where they flamed out in the second round. Last year, if Kevin Durant's toe isn't on the line or heel on the line, whatever it was, maybe the Bucks lose in the second round, and then he's looking to go out the door. That's the kind of fickle nature of this league. So who's to say there won't be another disgruntled player, or not disgruntled, but just a player looking to move elsewhere at some point down the line in the near future here who does put Dallas and Luka Doncic on his list.
What was your view of the Christian Wood trade?
I think ultimately Dallas, from everything I was told, they did not want to be taking on future salary at that 26th pick, just with the fact that they're going to potentially go into the tax year. And probably, I mean, it seems almost definitely go into the tax for the first time since 2011, I believe. With that, I mean, to shed all that salary and turn it into Christian Wood, you know, I think it was a pretty value play. But we'll see if he really is a true piece that can help push the Mavericks further in the Western Conference. There are questions about him defensively, of course. I think that's the biggest question on the court, to see how he will fit in Jason Kidd's system and rotation and all that. But he does provide a lot of offensive firepower that the Mavericks seem to be lacking in other positions or other people in their front court rotation.
Jake Fischer from Bleacher Report joining us on the Diamond Factory hotline. If you want more, Jake, you got Built to Lose, how the NBA's tanking era changed the league forever. What is going on with Kyrie Irving?
Kyrie Irving, I think, will go back to Brooklyn. However, there's still work that needs to be done. And as I wrote today, the lead item in my notebook at BR, he clearly wants to find long-term salary, and the Nets clearly want to bring him back more so on a short-term deal with, you know, incentives kind of based throughout it. A lot of them based on games played and other things. They're just going to need to have more conversations on both sides before his June 29th opt-in deadline for his, I believe it's a $36.9 million player option for next season. But, you know, the other teams that he's apparently interested in, the Lakers, the Knicks, I just don't see a real likely path for that to happen. And for him to really get paid and to be in a championship contending environment, it really seems like Kyrie's always been destined to return to Brooklyn in some capacity.
But Durant definitely wants him back still, right?
I believe so.
Is DeAndre Ayton leaving Phoenix?
So he's been someone that everyone around the league has of late been operating under the assumption is definitely going, but I have heard that the Suns have told a couple of agents of late that they are planning to try to retain him. So maybe that's smoke in this never-ending. I mean, we're in this cycle of lies and BS and smoke screens right now. Maybe that's the case. But maybe they also are starting to forecast their sign and trade options and realize that bringing DeAndre Ayton might be their best case scenario. I still am expecting him to head elsewhere. I think his people and DeAndre Ayton would like to find him a new home. But, you know, the Suns do have matching rights, so they do have the ultimate bird in their hand.
How good do you feel about what's going to happen at the top of the draft on Thursday night? Orlando's GM trying to play all coy yesterday. We still don't know. We're still entertaining. There's a lot of good players. What do you think is going to happen 1, 2, 3?
Everyone is expecting Jabari Smith to be the number one pick to the Orlando Magic. I wrote about this today in that story as well. He's been the top prospect that has wanted to go to Orlando all along. The other two guys, Chet Holmgren and Paolo Banchero, have certainly signaled and done things behind the scenes to suggest that, you know, Chet and his people would prefer to go to OKC. Paolo seems to be very happy with the idea of going number 3 to Houston. But I'm still prepared for Paolo to be the number 2 pick with the Thunder. No one knows what the Thunder are going to do. They pride themselves on not speaking outside of their offices and keeping everything buttoned up there. But I do think there's a chance that Paolo goes number 2. And, you know, at that point, if that's the scenario, at 3 with Houston, and then we could see a wrinkle. I mean, the Rockets have been talking about just taking whichever one of the big 3 is available there. But, you know, once the draft comes and you're on the clock and teams are starting to call you with trade offers that maybe they weren't bringing to the table this week and last week previously, anything can happen. But everyone is mostly working under the assumption that it will be that big three in some order.
Jake, last thing, just to clarify, I thought you said the price for Brunson well over 20, but the Mavs weren't going to want to hit the $100 million figure. Did you say that, and how would that work?
I think I don't want to speak too definitively because I don't know too definitively, and obviously there's gray area of what's legally allowed to be discussed right now.
Yeah.
But I'm expecting his deal in Dallas to be somewhere around 4 years, $90 million at this point. That's my latest information to form an educated guess, if you will.